What's up, boys? Happy to see everybody for another episode of the Blind Pig Podcast, courtesy of bgobsession.com. If you've been here before, you know the drill. Give us a like, a share, and a follow. Hook us up with the subscribe button if you're following us on YouTube, or just listen along on all major audio platforms. If you want to catch us digitally, obviously, you know you can catch us on all socials. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X, whatever they're calling it these days. I think we're now on Blue Sky, and then, of course, John calls it the mothership, bgobsession.com. I'm happy to say we are joined by one of our newest members on bgobsession.com, but somebody who's been in the Washington organization message boards for a long time. Skinsinparadise, welcome, brother. Happy to have you on. During a transition not long ago, you were highly touted to be joined back, wanting other joining members to come find you. So we appreciate you. We've enjoyed a lot of what your draft talk is, so we thought it would be good to have you on, as you can bring some good insight.
Yeah, we had to. We, in the interest of transparency, you know, we don't pretend to be draft experts.
We like getting people smarter than us on here. That's
years, but
we don't have to talk as much.
Skins in Paradise, or SIP as I will call him tonight. He's been one of the guys that's driving our draft thread with a ton of good information. So we kind of coerce him into coming on in the hope that he knows more than we do. And I'm pretty sure that's going to be proved to be true. So anyway, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks.
So real quick, before we get into the draft, SIP, since this is your first time on, I'd love to hear your 5-minute reaction to the year that was 2024 Washington Commanders. We have all talked about it at length on here, so I'd love to hear you just kind of, if you could just react to what happened and how you felt as the season went on, and how you came away from the NFC Championship appearance.
Yeah, no, I was actually just talking to somebody an hour or so ago. You know, when I was looking on Twitter, I saw a couple of people pick this team as being one of the top 4 2005, and I was saying that, you know, boy have things changed, because typically at this time of the year, me among others are bemoaning the fact that, you know, when people come out with the mock drafts for the subsequent year, where, you know, picking number 1 projection or picking number 2 or picking top 5, even if the Giants have a worse season, you know, the season before that we did, people are still picking us to go dead last. And just to see how everything has kind of gone full circle, where it maybe some national pundits maybe are even a little bit too optimistic, but I enjoy it. But, you know, essentially that was a you know, a product of a magical season. And yeah, I mean, some of these last minute Jaden Daniel heroics, you know, it's the best season this team has had since 1991, and it was an incredible ride. I went to see a bunch of the games live, including one of the playoff games, and it was in all my years of attending live games and experiencing, you know, this team in an intense way like you guys have. This was my, you know, the best season since 1991. And I was a bit young in 1991, so I've really enjoyed it, considering how bleak, you know, the last 30 years or so have been. But it was an incredible ride.
Yeah, I think you were talking about how we're not used to getting all this praise and optimism, especially from the media guys and NFL experts. I can't believe how many articles I've read where Washington may have had the best free agency in the NFL. And I'm like, I mean, I think we did pretty. I love the Tunsil thing. Oh, and again, that wasn't even free agency. Tunsil and Debo, which were both trades, not even free agency. So I'm kind of like, that seems a little over the top to me. But okay, I'll take it. You know. Hi, Derek.
Hey, I didn't even mean to do that. Welcome to my face. That's cool.
It's all about Derek.
Yeah, it is. Hey, don't forget about it. I'm in charge. All right, gentlemen. So that's a good segue to get started, I guess. John, if you want us to jump into our first draft analysis, I guess. We're going to do things a little bit differently. In the past, we've gone through and each one of us picked 3 or 4 guys that we would be interested in drafting up and down the board. This year, we're going to shift it around a little bit. Today, we're going to talk about offensively, primarily day 1 or day 2 draft picks. And then we'll have another podcast defensively same, and then we'll have another podcast that looks more day 3 guys. That way we can really dig into the sleepers, because that's Paul's favorite part of draft season. It's finding the one that nobody else is talking about and then saying he was right all along. So I'll lead it off. I had running backs. I was going to pick running backs. My day 1 running back, I've been watching. This is the guy I've had all along, Travion Henderson. Obviously, there's other guys out there like Ashton Genty. Genty's not going to be there at 29, let's just be honest. So I'm not even going to spend my time there. But I think Henderson can be. 5'10", 202, as you can see, ran a 4.43 at the combine. 22 years old. He's actually from Hopewell, Virginia. So he's a local kid. He's a suburb of Richmond. Overall media ranking has him capped around 50th overall on the big board. Some as high as 30, some a lot lower than that. His credentials, obviously second team All-Big-Ten Conference as a freshman, blew up in 21 when he first started playing at Ohio State. 2022, he actually broke a foot, missed half the season, a little less than half the season. 23, he had what he called a cheap shot against Notre Dame, but it injured his ribs. He missed 3 games. And then in 2024, he just went all bananas. Him and Quinshawn Judkins, who is another prospect that could go on day 1 or 2 of this draft, both had 1,000 yards rushing. Henderson had a little over 1,000 at 1,016, averaging 7.1 per carry, 10 touchdowns rushing. Add to that 27 catches, 284, and another touchdown receiving. So all he did was just about everything you can ask a guy to do as a running back. If I'm looking at a running back at 29, I'm looking for a weapon. He can't just be a running back. I think the day of workhorse running backs is going to the way of the dodo bird. I think it is now. Can you find your McCaffrey, your Alvin Kamara, your Jahmyr Gibbs, guys like that are complete game changers on multiple positions on the offense. So he's not just going to take the ball 25 times, hope to get to 100 yards and maybe a touchdown. That's gone. It's now explosive. It's now you only see 15 to 16 snaps a game. You might touch the ball 12 times, but what can you do with them, and can you change the pace of the game? I've watched him. He's actually on the NFL.com's athleticism score of a 92. If you paid attention to what the draft was up and down with Peters and company last year, this athleticism score was a major part of it. Everybody they took was an athlete. This was not just, he was a starter. It was guys who are athletic freaks, and he is one of them. He is a home run hitting threat every time he touches the ball, and he has the ability. He is really good in space. He sets up his blockers and his defenders, and he is just a beast. So if I took a running back at 29, obviously if somebody didn't fall, I would go Travion Henderson, running back, Ohio State.
So let's take a quick. We're not going to do a ton of watching highlights, but let's just, for those that haven't seen them, we'll give you a glimpse, or we're going to try to anyway.
Depends on the software package.
Yeah.
Nope, doesn't work. Ooh. I don't think it's going to work, John. Did he freeze?
He may have.
John froze the podcast, fellas. All right. While we get this figured out, what do you Sip? I'm curious. What do you think of Henderson? You've been running the draft board for a while.
Yeah, actually, he was the same guy I picked. If Omarion Hampton fell, I'd pick Hampton, but I don't think he will. Henderson, I know Todd McShay thinks he's going to go in the late first, so right around this range. A lot of others think more likely in the second round. I would be absolutely fine with taking him right now. I've taken him at 29. Everything you said is spot on. I mean, the only things I'll add a little bit about him is he didn't fumble even one time, which is an issue with a lot of these speedy running backs. I think we're about to talk about another one. And did not fumble. He's a pass protector. The only downside reading about him is he really struggled when you loaded the box against him. He was one of the worst in this class against loaded boxes. And his teammate, Judkins, was actually pretty good against, more of a power runner, pretty good against loaded boxes. But Henderson, if I recall, was almost 50% of the time got zero. Actually, no, he got zero when he got hit at the line of scrimmage. There's a bunch of other running backs who can sort of basically play a bit more physical than Henderson. But if you want explosion and you want a pass catcher who could pass block and who doesn't fumble the ball and has a little Jahmyr Gibbs in them, he's the guy. I think he's perfectly suited for this offense. Also, a lot of his runs were happen on the inside versus the out. A lot of these fast running backs are more outside runners. He's more of an inside runner, which really kind of flows well with this offense with the read option and RPOs. And a lot of times, it's Jaden going to the right, and there's usually like an opening, somewhere, on the A or B gap. And I think he's really well suited for that. So no, I think that's the guy I would go for as well. So I think that's spot on personally.
I looked into Hampton a little bit. I will say I liked Hampton, but I wonder about his finishing ability. There are multiple plays where he broke into the open and he was caught from behind or from an angle. Not to sound terrible, and I'm not trying to put him down, but that's a rich man Brian Robinson to me. I mean, Hampton definitely is bouncing off linebackers and bouncing off tacklers, but we have a guy now on the team who people are continually frustrated with because when he gets in the open field, he doesn't finish the play. He can't. He doesn't have that finishing speed, and I just think Henderson is different there. I think he's the guy that can, he can complete the play. So
yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. Hampton is he had one of and going back to Henderson for a second. The other thing Henderson was great at is these longer runs, these 15+ yard runs, and he had the highest percentage. But Hampton actually had one of the highest numbers of 15+ yard runs, which is not something that Brian Robinson majors in. Hampton's I think 40 was 4 feet, better pass protector, much better with his hands.
Hampton was a 4.46. But I hate to cut you off, but John's locked out, so we're gonna have to kill this and we're gonna have to restart this. Aren't you guys excited?
Okay.
Oh no, he got back in. Never mind. John's back.
Oh, okay.
He's made it. He's back. He fixed it. Oh, he got on his phone. That worked.
I got a paperweight. I got a paperweight for a laptop right now.
Did it completely lock everything up? All right. So
yeah, man. I mean, my keyboard won't work. I don't know.
Okay.
So anyway.
All right. Well, then we can
First
omit
time for everything, right?
We can omit the other stuff. I'll move on to my day 2 guy. This is a guy that I've actually really liked from the beginning because this is the epitome of what I want as a running back that we're adding, and this is a weapon. It's Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee. Second rounder, maybe. I think he'll be there at 61. 5'11", 190. I've also seen it reported at 5'8", 200, which is just absolutely bananas that you can have that stark of a difference. 4'4", 240. Fastest among not the fastest among running backs, but the fastest among extremely fast, totally explosive. He turns 21 during the season, so he's still young. He is a fluid runner. If you watch him run, go back and if you watch his highlight tapes, when he's running, he looks like he's jogging and he's just getting away from everybody. It's just crazy. He has the ability to break tackles. There are multiple times you'll see him get into the second and third level, and he will be bouncing off tacklers. He will not be, he's not getting single guys tackling him. He has the ability. In college, in 2025 or 2024, he had 258 carries for a little under 1,500 yards and 22 touchdowns. All of those led the SEC, which is just kind of, that weak conference that we all talk about in the lower southeast part of the country. So in addition to that, he had 20 additional catches for 143 yards. So what I really like about him is his explosion. The biggest knock, the biggest concern with him is his fumbles. He had 4 fumbles in 24. But I've seen some reporting, some people digging into it. On the majority of those fumbles, they were situations where he was trying to get extra yardage. So I think that's more coachable than the guy who just can't seem to handle the ball when he's going through traffic. Mm-hmm. People are ripping, people are grabbing, people are clawing, they're punching you in your ribs. They're doing what they need to do. That does not mean that you can handle 4 fumbles in a season. If you extrapolate that out over an NFL year versus a college year, you're probably talking about 6 to 6.5 every year. That ain't going to cut it. You won't make it in the NFL. You'll be, oh my gosh, I'm spacing Tiki Barber before he reinvented himself, but we had a guy who fumbled like hell too. So that's my second round pick because I think the upside is just different. He is a guy who can just completely blow the top off of the defense. Dylan Sampson, Tennessee. No comment? Sure, go for it, Sip. I would love to hear what you got to say.
Yeah, he was my guy until recently. In fact, on the draft thread, I was really pushing Sampson, and I still like him. It's just when I've dived a little bit deeper, I have a little more concerns about him. I don't really have any concerns about Henderson. But as far as Sampson goes, you mentioned the fumbles. He's also, kind of hit and miss as far as catching the ball. He didn't have one of the stats-wise, he was not as good as a lot of his peers as far as pass catching. He had one of the highest drop rates as far as pass catching. I guess somewhere around 8%, which is okay. But when you team that up with the fact that he didn't have a lot of pass catching production, got some turns there. He's okay in pass protect. As far as the fumbles go, sometimes motion with small hands, including dropping passes. He has 8 inches and change hands. When I kind of dived a little bit deeper into like the macro numbers with him, unlike Henderson, he doesn't have a lot of percentage-wise as far as 15-plus yard runs. Not a lot of them. Like his numbers were kind of pedestrian on that front, but his highlights are insane. He's kind of like a Henderson light. He kind of moves. He's more. It's something. Sometimes I'll debate on the board about this, about the speed. It's not always purely about speed. It's about agility and explosion, and he has plenty of that. So I think he's a good complement to a Brian Robinson if they keep Brian Robinson. So I think he's a good pick. I would probably go with somebody else, but I would not be mad if they took him, in the late second round. I think that's probably around the range where he likely goes to, probably somewhere there, early third, give or take.
So, John, now that you've circled back around, you got anything about Henderson or Sampson, or are we going to jump next?
No, I don't have anything on those guys. I think, I'm with you. And again, sorry for the tech difficulties, but we right when I got locked up and booted out, you were talking about how it's got to be a running back in the first round has got to be a difference maker. And the only comment I would make is I agree with that. I don't know. It's I wouldn't be surprised if they took a running back late in the first round. But you better get it right if you do, I guess is the way I look at it, because it's not a quarterback and it's not an edge rusher and it's not a left tackle. And so I guess if I had to say anything, I'd say if we have the ability to trade down and get more picks and we're looking for running backs in this draft, this is a really great draft to do that in, because there are some guys, there are going to be some sleeper guys that we're talking about 2 or 3 years from now who were not first round, were not taken in the first round.
My favorite running back of this draft is probably a 4th or 5th round pick right now. So I'm not even gonna lie. I think you're right. But
Yeah,
brother, you had wide receivers. Do you want to kick that off?
Yeah. And the hardest thing about talking wide receivers is who's going to be there, because it's just, you just never know. And we don't know, guys could drop, there could be a run on wide receivers. But the guy that I picked for my day one pick is Matthew Golden out of Texas. And I kind of went with two guys on day one and day two that are totally different kind of wide receivers. But Matthew Golden is the burner of all burners in this draft. He just ran a 4.29 40 at the combine, which I think that might be a reason why he's not there at 29. If we were, and again, I'm not even going to get into would we take a wide receiver at 29 after we brought Deebo Samuel in. I think the answer is if he's good enough, if they think he's like going to be a dominating wide receiver for years to come, they could. He's a small guy, 6 foot, 195 pounds. In 2024, he had close to 1,000 receiving yards, 58 catches. One of the things that catches your eye about him is he averaged 17 yards per catch, so he can really get downfield. And the other thing that caught my eye is he's a pretty talented kick returner. He had 14 kickoff returns for almost 300 yards in 2024. I think he ran a couple back, and that was a 20.4 yard average. He played at Houston for the 22 and 2023 seasons. He got hurt the second half of 2023 with a foot injury. So that's a little bit of a flag, but the guy just can get downfield vertical, and he would immediately be a downfield deep threat for us. And the other thing that really I like about him is his best performances came in the biggest moments. In the SEC championship, he had 162 yards receiving and the game-winning touchdown in overtime in the Peach Bowl. So, I mean, those are probably the two biggest games of the season, and he was the biggest star on the field in those games. And then I also think he's one of those guys he just can make these. He'll have balls come to him that are not perfectly thrown, but he somehow gets his hands on them, and he has really great body control. So he just is an intriguing guy to me. And then my day two guy, I might even want him more than Matthew Golden, and that's Jaden Higgins, who is played his last season at Iowa State. I think the 2 years prior to that, he was at Eastern Kentucky. He's not as fast as Matthew Golden, but he's big. He's 6'4", 215 pounds, still runs a 4.47 40. And he's just a physical mismatch when he's on the field. He had a really big 2024, 87 catches, 1,183 yards, 9 touchdowns, really, really good hands. He had a 3% drop rate over 350 catches, and he can run every route. They used him in the slot. They used him outside, downfield. He's a really good route runner. And, he had 500-plus yard games in 2024. So he's just one of those guys that's productive and very agile. So I think he would be a great pickup. And plus, you got it's Jaden to Jaden thing going. Yeah, so that's got to count for something. But anyway, there's some really good wide receivers. I just don't know. I think it's really hard to predict who's going to slide up or down and be the guy that's like, oh, we can't pass on him at 29 or even in the second round, or whether they're going to get snatched up early.
John, I'm curious. Where do you like? You mentioned the 40. How much? And I'd love to hear all four of you guys. How much do you actually think the 40 matters?
Well, it matters on draft day because
I know, but that's my point. Is how much does it really matter?
I don't think it matters as much as we think it does in terms of who's going to be the real top 2 or 3 wide receivers, 5 years from now. I think it's over. I think hands, being able to get separation, those are different things from just raw speed. And we saw that with, like Dimey Brown, I think was pretty fast on the face of it. But anyway, I don't think I do think it can have a big impact. Like, I would not be surprised at all if Matthew Golden gets drafted 10 spots higher than everyone thinks he is going to get drafted. Because I think he was slated like maybe end of the first round before the combine, and I bet you that's changed now.
What about you, Sip? How much do you invest in the 40 time when evaluating skill position players?
Depends on the player, depends on the context. It's funny, you guys mentioned De'Ami Brown. It's one example for me, which is, if I recall, he ran like a 4.45 or 4.46, and they talk about him like, the team sometimes, like, or Ron Rivera back in the day, like he's like this, like Tyreek Hill kind of killer, deep threat because of his speed. That's good speed if you're just a possession receiver, or just I don't know, just a run of the mill. I don't major in the deep ball type of speed, but that's not killer deep ball. Like if I think of the deep ball, for example, you don't have to be fast, but usually the deep ball specialists who are not insanely fast are big. It's usually one or the other. It's like if you're a deep ball specialist, you're usually sub 4, or you're kind of a little bit like Higgins. Even though he wasn't really that much of a deep ball guy either, but I think he has potential to be that because he's tall, he has a great catch radius, he runs fast enough. But the De'Ami stuff used to kind of drive me crazy because I think that's decent speed for a deep ball guy, but nothing special. So to me, it all depends on what type of receiver and the context. Yeah, as far as Golden specifically, he is so good at separating that when you add that 4.29 speed to that mix, it's very tantalizing, and he wasn't so much that big play guy. He was to some extent, but he wasn't like Tyreek Hill, in college, but he has potential to be that. But considering he can get open on all 3 levels and he has that kind of burner speed, speed alone, I don't look at just speed alone because there are plenty of pedestrian receivers who are super duper fast. But yeah, Higgins was one of my guys too in the second round. I don't know if he's going to be there in the late second, but he reminds me a lot of AJ Green when I watch him. His catch radius is insane.
Yes. And he's got a 70, almost an 80-inch wingspan.
Yeah. He's 6'4", and he has 34-inch arms. Like McMillan, some people hit him for having, I think it's like 31-inch arms. Also a catch radius guy. But yeah, I think Higgins is a bit underrated. He's not much of a yak guy. He's not the most physical guy, but as you said, he doesn't drop anything. He makes plays all over the field. I think he's perfect for Jaden. I don't know if I don't know if he's going to be there in the late second. I suspect he's going to go early.
And
second.
Iowa State has
I
two
love
well-regarded receivers.
Yeah.
What, Tony? What were you saying, buddy?
Doesn't Iowa State have 2 highly regarded wide receivers in this draft? I forget the other guy's name, but I think that's also interesting too because you don't really think about Iowa State when it comes to NFL talent. But I just found that interesting. But I've seen the guy you mentioned, John, mock to us in a lot of the mocks out there. And I think one thing that was interesting about Golden too is that he was productive at Houston, and then he still continued it when he bumped up to Texas too. So it'll be interesting to see where he falls in the first round.
Tony, how much do you look at the 40 time when you look at skill position players?
Yeah, I think it's a factor, but it's not like the end all be all. It's kind of like Sip was saying, you got to factor it into everything. Historically, like whoever's had like the fastest 40 in the combine hasn't always panned out to be anything in the NFL. So it kind of matters like what you do on the field. But I think there's like a threshold or like a cutoff, right? Like whatever the low end, there's like a bad side of it, right? Like you don't want a receiver that's
Anyone remember what McLaurin's 40 time was? I bet you it wasn't.
He was sub 4.4.
High 4.3.
Yeah, he was sub 4.4.
And to answer your question, Derek, in terms of 40 time, when you think of Terry McLaurin, who is one of our most productive receivers in recent memory in our franchise's history. Think about what makes him great. What makes him great are his hands, his route running ability, his competitiveness, and his fire. Those are the traits I look for in a wide receiver. It's kind of equivalent to our quarterbacks, right? You can have the biggest arm, you can have the mobility and whatnot, but at the end of the day, what matters with the quarterback position is your processing ability. So sometimes it's those other intangibles that make the absolute most important difference. So again, going back to that 40 time thing, I would probably put it like number 3 on my list in terms of most important traits when it comes to wide receivers.
Well, the reason I bring it up, and sorry not to rip off your segment here, John, but the whole point was that there was just a wide receiver who has been really highly regarded who ran a 4.8 40 at his pro day, and everybody's like bashing him, like it's that's really and I'm like, I always go back to the difference between a 4.35 40 and a 4.45 40 is literally a tenth of a second. Our human brain can't even compute a tenth of a second. If you try to stop a stopwatch in a tenth of a second, it's not exactly simple, and they're doing that over 40 yards. So going 100 yards, you're talking about a diminishment of what, 25 tenths of a second, like. So it's just I kind of laugh with the people who say that a 4.6 is slow compared to a 4.45 when it ain't that slow. It ain't that much of a difference. But sorry, John. Back to your day 2 guy. What you got, brother?
Oh, Jaden Higgins was my day 2 guy.
Oh, Jaden Higgins. Okay, I thought you were.
Although I think Sip said it is he might not. Where we're picking, he might not be there. He probably won't be there.
All right, gentlemen. Well, next up we have offensive line. Brother Paul, your favorite position, my friend. Absolutely. What do you got for us? Day 1, day 2.
All right. So in doing my day 1 and day 2 picks, I also thought about 2 different scenarios. So my first assumption or scenario was the condition under which we potentially have Brandon Coleman play at left guard as opposed to going outside to right tackle. So if the plan is to put Brandon Coleman at left guard, my day 1 prospect would be Josh Connerly out of Oregon. He's an offensive tackle, 21 years old, 6'5", 311 pounds. He fits a lot of the criteria that Adam Peters looks for in the draft, and that being having huge amounts of athleticism. We've heard a lot of people talk about relative athletic score testing and how all the guys that he picked last year, with the exception of Mike Sainristil, had testing numbers of over 9. Connerly posted a really high number. He was almost at 9, 8.98. He's got the athleticism is off the chart. He's an offensive lineman who played running back, linebacker, and defensive end in high school. So that gives you a little bit of a sense as to this guy's athleticism. He's played 41 games in Oregon over his 3 years there. He became a full-time starter in his second year at left tackle. He gave up 1 sack and 511 pass blocking opportunities a year ago. He's an All-American, all Big Ten honors. He's had a huge amount of production over the last couple of years playing on a big stage at a big school. Our team is obviously interested in him. We have a top 30 visit scheduled with him. We had a formal meeting with Josh Connerly at the Combine, so there has to be some level of interest there. A few of his strengths really quickly. He's applauded for his quick feet. He's got very, very fluid and awesome movement skills. He's great in space, off the charts in that regard. He can get anywhere on the field that you want him to be, and he can execute blocks. So he's got really good range. The knock on him would be generating more power in the run game. And a lot of his weaknesses that people talk about basically stem from him being young and needing to get stronger. So this is the kind of guy that I feel like you put him in a weight room, he can be a staple on this offensive line for years to come. So the next thing I want to talk about is how he would fit into our team. So as I mentioned, in the event that you have Brandon Coleman potentially slide to left guard, you're staring at a situation where maybe Andrew Wiley is going to start your season next year at right tackle. But let's face it, the Wileys, the Nick Allegrettis of the world, those are serviceable players, but they're also players that you should also be looking to upgrade from if you want to be a serious Super Bowl contender. More often than not, I would argue that if you want to be a Super Bowl champion, your offensive line needs to be closer to that elite status as opposed to that average status. So long-term, a line from left to right, think of this: Tunzel, Coleman, Biotish, Cosme, Connerly. That blends youth experience. It blends youth and experience really, really nicely. And it gives you the makings of a group that you can easily see rising to the top 5-6 status in the NFL. In short term, I mentioned that, if you draft a guy like Connerly, maybe he has to be given a bit of time to grow into the position like Coleman did last year. At the latest, you can probably see him being a plug-and-play player by 2026 at right tackle and beyond. So you might be staring at a situation where you're easing him into the role. But the question becomes, can our team afford to bring in a player like this filled with tons of promise and a lot of that long-term sky's the limit potential in the opening round when we have a limited number of picks and when we have so many other needs? So in some ways, he feels like a pick that can maybe be a luxury pick at 29, given that he might need a little bit of time to grow into his position. However, all that being said, he appears to be a very, very safe prospect. He's got a super, super duper high ceiling. He gives you flexibility in terms of succession planning as well, in my opinion. He can be your right tackle for the next 10 to 12 years, or we can also be thinking about, thinking ahead, thinking to Tunsil. If we don't re-sign him in a couple of years, you might potentially have an in-house replacement that's just literally waiting in the wings that you can slot in at left tackle eventually. I know there's a lot of people that probably aren't high on picking offensive line in the first round, but remember, those scoffing at taking O-line in the first round, this team goes as Jaden Daniels goes. An investment in our offensive line is an investment in your most prized possession. And you simply can't have enough good linemen. And to me, Josh Connerly is a future Pro Bowler. We saw what happened to Houston last year. They gave up the second most sacks in the NFL. Everyone expected CJ Stroud to make that, that next leap forward and take another step. He didn't have a terrible year, but that team on a whole took a step back because they ignored some of the deficiencies on their offensive line last year. We can't let that situation happen here in Washington, given the positive momentum that our organization has built. So, again, for me, Connerly, as a day one pick, I think he can be a rock solid player for years to come and someone that can be a staple on your line. How can you say no to that? For my day two guy, I got so my other scenario would be this. For my day two player, my scenario is, okay, Brandon Coleman is going to flip to the other side and play right tackle. So for day two, under that assumption, I would be looking at a guy like Jonah Savanaia, who's from Arizona. He's an offensive tackle, but a lot of people see him as having a future on the inside at guard. He's 6'5", he's 336 pounds. He's just a mountain of a lineman, like a huge hulking player. He's got a massive frame. He's got a ton of power, and he fits really well into that mold that Peters seems to be trying to establish in Washington, and that being bringing in players that are really, really big and got a lot of size in the offensive line. So I talked about with the RAS score with Connerly. Savanaia had a 9.12. He's got tons of athletic upside as well. He ran a 4.95 40-yard dash time as a 336-pound 6'5" lineman. And his 10-second split was 1.72 seconds. So that kind of alludes to his athleticism. He started 36 games at Arizona. He's played mostly right tackle, but he's also played right guard. He's got great durability. He hasn't missed time. He's logged over 2,400 snaps in college. A couple of his strengths He's got good spatial awareness, so he's got the processing skills. He's intelligent. He's a very cerebral player. Good at targeting second level defenders as well, and he gives you some of that position versatility, given that he's played tackle and he's also played guard. How he fits our team. So again, he's got that mauling presence, ties in perfectly with the image and identity that we're trying to establish in Washington, and that being a team that's really, really physical and a team that's going to tear your face off. He's got that type of disposition as a lineman. You can't get bullied up front, and our team, in my opinion, still has a ways to go in that regard. If you think of it, a trio of Biotish, Cosme, and potentially Savanaia on the inside could be a really strong interior for years to come, and it combats the interior strength of the Eagles, the team that you're basically and quite honestly gunning for. He's a safe prospect. He's one that you can feel really confident about into turning into a serviceable player and a serviceable starter fairly quickly. I think those are the types of players that all teams should be trying to covet in day two. Guys that you can feel safe and good about contributing early on. So yeah, he would totally be another player that I'm very excited about. So that's what I got for my day 1 and 2 guys for O-line.
Paul, sometimes I wonder if you go through and find the hardest last names. Because this is like year 2 or 3 that you've done. Stavanaia? I like it.
Who was the guy last year? It was the guy that the Bears drafted. Amagaji.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah, the guy out of Yale.
So yeah, so if we draft him, you're gonna have to do all the follow-up reporting on him. Because
all right, sounds good.
So Sip, I know Connerly was one of your guys as well. I was just curious if you had anything to add about him.
Yeah, I mean, the team, yes, is definitely, as you mentioned, poking around on him. You know, I think he had a combine formal meeting, and he has a top 30 meeting coming up. The reason why I mention it is my one potential concern is he's known more of a zone blocking guy, and that they block, Washington blocks a lot of gap, but obviously they feel he could adjust, or maybe they're looking to adjust their own scheme. So obviously they think there's a fit there. He played really well against Abdul Carter. He's not much more, but he's a better pass protector, in my opinion, than Coleman right now. I keep hearing that they're going to move Coleman to the right tackle instead of guard, which I think could work, but I do think Connerly would be the better pass protector, at least, at right tackle, and I'd rather have Coleman as guard if it were me. But I agree with everything you said about how, it's you add it could be a guard I'll talk about in a second, or it could be a tackle. But I do think this O-line is missing one more player if they want to be like the Lions and the Eagles and have this really forceful O-line that could compete with, especially the Eagles, who have a monster D-line. As far as guard goes, I looked at Jonah, but just by chance, and I actually posted about him a few hours ago today for the first time. And I know Logan Paulson is a big fan and got my attention. I like him. There's two guards I like maybe a little bit more, and I know one Washington's also scoping out, which is Wyatt Milam, who they also have a 30 visit, and they had a combine visit, 30 visit coming up, and a combine visit already. And I think he's one of the only tackles who gave up no sacks at all. He is kind of an old school Hogs type of player, has a really quite the mean streak, especially in the run game. He's he's like a people mover in the run game. Pretty stout as a pass protector. He played left tackle, and he has like 32 inches and change as far as his arms go, so he's better suited to play guard. But I think he has the right demeanor. I think he's a little bit better pass protector than Jonah, who Jonah gave. It's like my Frozen. Can you guys?
You're
We
good,
can
buddy.
hear you.
Keep going.
We can hear you, Sip.
Oh, okay. All right. Jonah gave up 4 sacks. And when I was watching Jonah, like he was having a hard time with
Now he's locking up.
guys
Yeah.
with
Now he's frozen.
Mhm.
Sip, if you can hear us, you're frozen, bud. Hold on. Don't keep talking because I promise they can't hear you. I don't want you to waste your breath. But Paul, as always, enjoy the breakdown. That is a flattering picture of Sip right there, by the way. If you're on YouTube, that is great. All right. The last position group we can get into. Old Tony. What you got, brother? What are we looking at tight end?
All right, I had tight end, and tight end's kind of a unique position, both from how the draft is looking, and then from what we're looking for. So I think where we're drafting in the first round, there's not going to be a tight end available. From everything I've looked at, Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland should be long gone. So the 2 guys I looked at are more in the next tier, so from like second round on, because I just think the way the draft falls, unless something wacky happens, Warren and Loveland will be already drafted, and I don't think there's another guy that's really going to be in the first round. So one of the guys I looked at in the next tier was Elijah Arroyo from Miami. He did have some injuries in college, but he seems to have all the tools to be a productive tight end. He's 6'4", 250 with a strong frame. You know, that he's kind of like the prototypical size in the modern NFL that we see at the tight end, receiving wise and everything. He's got a route running ability and reliable hands. For as terms of blocking, from what I've seen, he's a willing and capable blocker. But although not amazing, but he's willing and capable to stick his nose in there. And then in the red zone, with his size, he's a good red zone target. And with us, you saw that last season that Ertz, we used him all the time in the red zone. Some of the concerns with him, he did tear his ACL his sophomore year, so his tape isn't as deep as some other prospects. And then in terms of route running, he does have the ability, but there are some things that you see that he needs to tweak and refine his technique for the next level. So with us, we're just running it back with the same tight end room. But if we want to look at someone that has a developmental potential and someone with a higher ceiling, I think Oreo is someone we might look at. So that's a name to watch. And then another guy in that second grouping tier that I looked at was Mason Taylor, the tight end from LSU. He's 6'5", 255. And he's actually the son of Hall of Famer Jason Taylor. So now, he's making his own way as a prospect. It's a totally different position. So, he comes from he has that football pedigree, that IQ. And from what I've seen, he's got reliable hands. He usually tries to catch the ball away from his body, so that, that's something you look for. So he's not always just trying to body catch the ball. He's got versatility. They've used him in the slot or even out wide at times. So, he's kind of someone that can move all over from the tight end spot. And from what else that I've read and seen, he's not afraid of contact. He fights for extra yards, and he plays with a competitive edge. He's got that SEC experience. Similar.
He's also got experience with Jaden.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. He's got a year with Jaden under his belt, so Jaden gets one of his guys. His blocking does need work. He's willing. He's not, like Bates or something. His athleticism is good, but not elite like some of these, freak move tight ends that we've seen. What I've seen, he's got like a higher floor kind of guy. So if you're looking for like a reliable kind of like do it all steady Eddie kind of tight end to add to the mix, I think he's someone that could be looked at in that next tier of guys in the day 2 or day 3. So yeah, those are the two guys I looked at.
So I'm curious, before you move on, Tony, how big, and I know you took tight end, but how big of a need do you think tight end is on day one or day two? Honestly.
Yeah. Day one, I don't think it is. I think we have the way the talent looks.
Unless Loveland is there, you're not taking a tight end.
Yeah, unless for some reason you can get one of those top two guys. I don't think with the way a board falls, the tight ends available would be the best player available for us. And then we decided to bring all the same guys back. So I don't think the team sees it as such a high need, at least for this season, with bringing Ertz back for one more go at it, and then hopefully Sennett is more acclimated to the NFL and can hopefully take his play level up a notch for when Ertz eventually does retire or move on.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's I agree with you that it's not a priority. First of all, tight end, typically you're not drafting on day one unless, it's somebody really special. But I mean, we have Ben Sinnott and John Bates. They re-signed Bates.
Yeah.
Obviously they think a lot of him. But as far as a pass catching tight end, we have a big question mark with Ben Sinnott. Ertz is probably in his last season. And then over on the other side with the wide receivers, the only guy under contract after this year is Luke McCaffrey, I believe. So this year maybe it doesn't matter as much, but we better find some like long-term weapons for for our star quarterback, because we're, in terms of looking beyond 2025, the cupboard's pretty damn bare right now.
Yeah. And then I know he's like a depth guy, plays special teams, but I have seen that Logan Paulson has said that the team likes Colson Yankoff. So we'll see. So he's coming back too. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree, John. Like long term, you definitely need to identify a receiving tight end, and hopefully Sennett develops into that. And if not, you're gonna have to address that.
Well, to that point, John, and I'm curious what you have to say about it, and then obviously Sip. Are you surprised that we signed, of the tight ends, we signed Bates to a 3-year deal? And it's literally just to be our third offensive tackle on the field. Like, unless you guys are seeing something from him, I'm not. Now, I will say there was a couple plays I saw this past season, one of which I believe was against Tampa Bay. Jaden was rolling to the right. It was played perfectly by Bates. He was open. Jaden just didn't find him early enough. He ended up having to throw a worm burner. Because by the time he got to him, it was too late. But of all guys, Bates is a 3-year deal. I mean, maybe we're not giving him enough credit in the past game.
Well, you heard what Zach Ertz said, man. And I mean, it's his teammate.
Yeah.
But Zach Ertz said he's the best blocking tight end he's ever seen. I mean,
right.
I mean, I don't know what would motivate him to say that. I guess I would say he must be really, really good, a lot better as a pass blocking tight end than we've ever given him credit for. Because that kind of got my attention when I heard him say that.
Sip, what do you think about the tight end room and in the prospects?
If they're in a win now mode, I think they could get away with the tight end room the way it is. As far as Sennett goes, as far as studying him as a prospect a year ago, and I'm trying to learn lessons each year I do this. My issue, I remember putting that on a different board, is like, I like him, but he's not that great of a separator. And I don't know if that's in college. He's a very physical player, but he wasn't that much of a separator. I loved Laporta, a couple of years before that, and I remember saying big time separator. And
that's John's favorite guy of all time, right there.
Laporta.
I covered him on one of the with this same podcast a couple of years ago, so I'm with you on him.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, I was a big fan, and I saw McShay said the other, I think maybe even today, that Loveland is sort of the equivalent, and with a bigger catch radius of Laporta. I don't quite agree with that, even though Laporta ended up in the second round, didn't have the same hype that Loveland has. I think there's a shot Loveland. I know it goes against the grain a little bit. falls into the late first, and I like him. But to me, he has some flaws that, like for example, Laporta was a beast with a ball in his hands. I mean, too. I mean, he was a a great yak player. Loveland's not that great of a yak player, and he's not that physical at the catch point as far as contested catches. I think he's a great separator. I remember Logan Paulson equated him to Zach Ertz. I agree with that. He could separate. They line him all over the place. He plays slot. He plays outside. F, Y, and I think he's an underrated blocker. A lot of people hit him as far as his blocking goes, as he did Laporta, but I think he's okay as a blocker. But I could see some teams hesitating where they're not taking him in, top 15, top 20. I know it's sort of an in vogue thing for a lot of the mock drafters to say that he's going, early, and some like him more than Warren, and maybe there's something to that, but I don't think it's crazy for him to be there in the late first. And I know PFF, when I do their simulators, he's always there, in the late first pretty much. And so I'd say there's a 50-50 shot he's there. And that would be my guy, just because I do think he is a great separator. So I do agree with that comparison with Laporta. I do think he separates. I do think he gets open. I do think he'd be a great outlet for Jaden. And Arroyo, who you mentioned, he's very, very intriguing. I mean, I don't know about his injury history, and I know he got hurt in the Senior Bowl. I don't think he ran the other day. So to me, it's all about his medicals. He was a late bloomer, exploded last year. But he's when you watch these tight ends back to back, he's insane. Speaking of Laporta, he's explosive, and sometimes his run blocking can be a lot of fun to watch. He's very physical. He makes plays on the first level, second level, deep. He looks like he could be a star. I went back and forth with him versus somebody else. I'm not as high on Mason Taylor. I like him, but to me, he seems like a high floor, low ceiling guy. Watching him, he caught a lot of short passes, a lot of quick outs. Good blocker, decent blocker. I think he'll be a solid player. But I didn't get too excited watching him as far as making big plays. When he had the ball in his hands, he was okay, but he wasn't like Arroyo, who was trying to had some wiggle and was trying to run over guys.
Yeah, he's definitely got some juice to him.
And to me, he comes across really solid. But Arroyo was he could be a superstar. I just don't know about the medicals. I also heard that he's a great interview, great guy. So I think he has a lot of potential.
I like it. I like it a lot. Well, Sip, I will speak on behalf of the guys. It's been a really good pleasure to have you on, despite, and then not yours, but technical difficulties up and down the board. This is why we do these things. We always record and share. We don't re-record, buddy. Mm-hmm. So, as John, you can tell, is struggling currently with what's going on. But
having me on, it was fun.
Absolutely, and this is what we do this for. It's enjoyable just to have a good discussion about football discussion. No pressure. But I am curious. We didn't really get your opinion, and maybe you can just double down. But as we sign this thing off, what is your biggest? What are your boxes that you would like to get checked in the draft coming up? If we could solidify or whatever, I don't care where or how, but what are you circling to say, I really hope we come out of this draft with this? Where would that be?
Yeah, for me, edge, cornerback, running back, and defensive tackle is really tempting, even though they don't need it. It might be they could use it. It's not a top need, but there's so many guys, especially in that second round range, that's just the talent is insane. They could use this draft to kind of catch up a little bit with the Eagles as far as the D line goes. It's really tough because we talk running backs and I've been accused a little bit of being a Brian Robinson hater. I don't hate him. I think he's okay, but it's just they could do so much better if they have an explosive running game. And so I'm torn because I think like the easy thing to do is take an edge, in round one, take maybe a cornerback in round two. And then if they don't trade down, if they trade down, it's a game changer. Hopefully they can do it. But let's say they don't find a trading partner, and then wait to the late fourth for a running back. And there's some potential running backs I might like in that range, but it's a bit dicey because you don't know what's going to happen. That's a long time to wait to take a running back.
One of those running backs, would his name also be a common herb that you grow in a garden, maybe? Maybe by the name of Basil Tootin. That's my dude right there. You'll be hearing me talk.
Yeah, Tootin is a guy I've talked about. Talk about speed. That's
fastest 40 at the combine, coming back to the 40.
Yeah, he has a little bit of that one concern that Henderson does, which is that if you stack the box, you could stuff him. Like he's struggled against if you load up the box, he's not done that hot against it. I don't know. I know nobody does, but I guess statistically speaking, he was one of the worst on that front. He has some fumble issues as well, but he is super fast, and he has more power to his game than people give him credit. Because he could break tackles, and I think he's more of a complete running back than most people give him credit. But yeah, to me, it's not just him. Like I like RJ Harvey. There's a bunch of guys. I suspect Tootin and Harvey and guys like that might be gone by the late fourth. But even if it's like somebody like Jordan James, I'm good with. I know they met with him. I know they met with Woody Marks, who should be there, maybe even later. But yeah, there's a bunch of backs, but I don't know where they. It's hard to guess where all these guys are going to go. I wish they had that mid-third round pick, because I think you're in a really good position there. But late fourth, it's harder to guess how many guys are gone at that point.
Yeah.
Well, Stip, as I will say, thanks for joining us, Tony, Paul. It's a pleasure, John. I hope you have black screen going on. I can't see you, but I hope you can hear us out there. And thank you if you have made it this far. There he is. There's the man. If you've made it this far, obviously, thank you for hanging on, watching us. Give us a like, a share, and a follow. Come by bgobsession.com. We've got some cool contests going on right now. One of which is the BGO on the clock competition that Paul's running. We also have now a BGO mock draft competition that you get a team that is not the Commanders. And we're going to have all 32 teams represented. Draft pick is going to be made live via message board posts. And then, of course, we get to spend the next 6 months arguing about whether or not we were right. All kinds of cool things going on. So bgobsession.com, come by, hook us up, like, share, and a follow. And as always, boys, I will end it and say that'll do, pigs. That'll do.